full rockets are on right now. We got the FOMC over with. So the question right now for you is, if you're sitting there and you've got, you know, your property portfolio, equity portfolio, and you're going, do I get into Bitcoin right now? This is the time. This is the time period in the last cycle, you know, where I wish I was buying at $5,000 in 2020 when my light bulb went on about Bitcoin. And now we're doing at an all-time. It's like in March of 2020 being like buying Bitcoin at $25,000, $30,000. This is so early in the cycle, it's unbelievable. And now is the time to get your position secured. If you're sitting there with a portfolio of real estate, equities, gold, whatever, let's have an honest conversation about some of these assets, and let's start thinking about, okay, maybe there's a little reason to pivot some of my capital into Bitcoin over this period. And some of you have the opportunity now, if you're lucky, to still get to one Bitcoin. And I think that's the inflection point for most people and their families and their last names. So if you can get to your one Bitcoin, if you are in a lucky position to be able to get to your one Bitcoin right now, then get to your one Bitcoin. You got BlackRock supporting this asset. You got the FOMC turning bullish. You got the whole. It's an election year in the U.S. There is so much pointing towards the bull side of this cycle. We've got a new all-time high before the halving. The halving's coming up. The demand is 10,000 Bitcoin a day. The supply is 900, about to dip to 450 a day in a few, in a short number of weeks. It's like there is absolutely no reason not to have an allocation and an exposure to Bitcoin, whatever that allocation is. And the beautiful thing about it now is, remember, you don't have to buy one Bitcoin. You could go in, if you've got $1 million portfolio and you want to make a 1% allocation, you can just go into your broker account and buy $10,000 of IBIT, FBTC, BITB, HODL, GBTC, whatever else you want to buy, right? And so that's what I would do at this point. It's become so easy, so effortless to get into Bitcoin. Now, if you're not looking at it at this point, you are just arrogant. You are being arrogant. It is the best performing asset the American capital markets have ever IPO'd. It is the fastest growing investment vehicle that we've seen, the ETFs. You got all of the asset managers behind it. It's going through an adoption curve, etc., etc., etc. The only thing that you need, and a lot of people have been talking about different price models and all this other stuff on Twitter, and I'm sure on YouTube too. And there's this espresso chugging mathematician that's apparently should be winning Nobel Prizes and this, that, and the other. And the maths basically shows that we're going up and to the right. And whenever I ask the question of, okay, so what would invalidate this model, the only damn answer I ever get is, oh, it would have to go up a lot and then never come back and down and touch the line. So I'm like, okay, well, the line says 200,000, for example. So if it goes to 1 million, does that invalidate the model? Like, no, it would have to stay there. Well, how long does it have to stay there? What if it comes back down and touches the line in 10 years? Well, that means the model's valid. Like, shut the fuck up. Like, this is all just stupid shit. None of it actually matters. My problem with these price models, including stock to flow, I think stock to flow is more, useful to a certain extent. I don't think this new model is useful by any stretch of the imagination. Is that real people that are listening to this shit are going to end up selling their Bitcoin because they think it's gone too far away from the line, and they're going to say the line told me to sell, and then Bitcoin's going to enter an S-curve adoption, right? And that's it. They'll never be able to buy that Bitcoin ever again because Bitcoin's actually an exponential growth asset. Tell me how all of the money in the world is about to adopt the scarcest asset humanity has ever seen, and we're not going to stop printing all this money. We're about to go through an adoption period for all this money buying Bitcoin, and we're not going to see exponential returns. It just doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. Again, I've said to the nutty professor, it's like, maybe I'm too stupid. Maybe I don't know maths well enough to understand what all the nerds are talking about. But to me, the biggest fear I have, and I've been saying this for months, the biggest fear I have is that people are going to get their egos to the point of going, I understand this cycle. I understand how Bitcoin works. You have just got a behemoth of a demand entrant into this asset, a demand vehicle into this asset. It is called the American ETFs. This is like, remember, 1% of BlackRock's assets is $100 billion of purchasing. I don't care what model you have. If you've got $100 billion of purchasing that's coming in from one demand source, that model is going to be torn to shreds. I don't care what it is. So I created a new model, right? It's called the gonal model, right? Basically, the gonal model is the one that is actually true in Bitcoin and has worked throughout the very inception of Bitcoin. The gonal model is trying to find out whether you have big enough balls to hold the humanity's scarcest, most valuable asset, and how long you can hold that for, and how long you have the testicular fortitude to hold that for. That is the gonal model that has absolutely worked every single time when it comes to Bitcoin. And it doesn't tell you, oh, the line told me to sell, oh, the line told me to do this. And then people are saying, oh, but it's interesting. It's like, find something else to entertain yourself. I'm pretty sure there's other things that you can do to entertain yourself more than studying the nutty thoughts of a line going straight and up in the up into the right. Like, it's like, this is, I don't know, it's silly, and I think it's going to end up getting people hurt. And I think that, you know, people are sitting here trying to figure out, okay, what do I do with my wealth? I'm talking about normal people. I'm not talking about nerds. I'm not talking about professors. I'm not talking about mathematicians that are jealous of Plan B. I'm not talking about all these people. I'm talking about normal people like you and I are sitting here trying to figure out, okay, how do I play this cycle out? And then you see some nutty bullshit like this, and you're like, oh, so maybe when it goes above 150,000, I should sell some. And then you sell some, and bam! Turns into an S-curve adoption. Bitcoin's now sitting at 350,000. What are you going to do then? You're going to look at your children and say, oh, the nutty professor that drank a lot of espressos and is jealous of Plan B, he told me about a line, and then I used the line, and the line told me to sell at 150,000. That's why you have no Bitcoin left. That's what you're going to do? Make it make sense. Look, we all know what this asset is. We all know what it's going to do. All of these price models, it happened in the last cycle as well with stock to flow. And again, I will say stock to flow can be useful, more useful. All models can be useful. Let's just be fair. All models can be useful, but trying to like emphasize this, someone saying, oh, this person deserves a Nobel Prize and all this other shit. It's like, no, buy Bitcoin. Pivot your assets, the work you've done for 35 years, buy Bitcoin. Shut the fuck up. You get fabulously wealthy. Like, that's it. That is the gonal model for Bitcoin that has worked forever. And I think that's what people need to focus on, because otherwise you focus on this stuff, you start trading in and out of Bitcoin, you are going to lose the wealth that you have worked hard to accumulate. And that's really the message that I have today. We're bullish. Jerome Powell is bullish. Larry Fink is bullish. You got to buy that. You got to get as much of that asset as you feel safe with in your portfolio. Speak to your advisor. Speak to whoever you need to speak to. Start having a position in your portfolio, and let's, you know, stay focused on what's going on here and not get distracted by any of the other bullshit. Like, here's the conversations that are going to come up. Same bullshit conversations in the last cycle. Lending on Bitcoin, cash flow on Bitcoin. You're going to have, you know, price models on Bitcoin. When should I sell on Bitcoin? Blah, 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 blah. Right now, it's about accumulation, and we're just about to break 66,000 again. And so, yeah, focus. That's what we need right now. Focus. Because ultimately, there are always only 3 rules to Bitcoin. Step number 1, you buy Bitcoin. Step number 2, shut the fuck up. And step number 3, you get fabulously wealthy.